Hi, welcome to a tutorial about the blues. In chapter 1, we will take a look at the theory. What does it mean with the blues? Although most people think that the blues is a feeling, that's not wrong, but it's not the whole truth, because the blues primarily is a song form, meaning a theoretical structure. Usually a blues has 12 bars. The best way to write this down is 4 bars in one line and then 3 lines. So we have a sum of 12 bars. The harmonic components are the 3 main triads of the major scale, which is the tonic, the subdominant and the dominant. The order is the following. In the first bar there is the first degree, the tonic. The second line, bar 5, is the subdominant. Then here is the tonic again. Then we have the dominant, the subdominant, and the tonic again. The Roman numerals refer to the position of the chord root within the scale of the key of the blues. We will come to this later. If you have no idea what this whole thing means with tonic, subdominant, dominant, you can watch the tutorial shown here. Well, to add a blues color, the common triad, to the common triads, the minor 7, the flat 7, is added to all of the triads. That means we don't have triads now, we have a 4-chord voicing. Just to be complete, these chords are not dominant 7 chords in the true sense, meaning they have not the function of a dominant 7 chords, because the 7 here is only a color. Maybe an exception is the dominant in the 5th degree, that could be considered as a dominant. We will have a look at in the key of C, let's have a look at the blues. What does it mean with real chords, not only with symbols of tonic and subdominant. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And now we need the Roman numbers. So we take the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as you can see, the 1 and the 4 and the 5 are the C, F, G. So what we do now is replace the numbers by the chords. Just here you can see the degrees we need for the blues, and we have changed it to chords now. This is the simplest kind of the blues. It's used in all styles of music, and the roots go back to the 1-4-1 or 5-4-1 cadence of classical music. And the difference is that in classical music you only use triads, and we use here 4 chord voicings with the blue note, the 7 as a blue note. So pretty easy. Now let's take a listen how this sounds. Fourth degree, tonic, 5th degree, 4, 1. So let's have a look at the single tones of the chords. So a chord consists of root, 3rd, 5th and 7th, and to determine which function the chord tones have, we use Arabic numbers instead of Roman numbers. For chords we need Arabic numbers for chord tones. So Again, we take the C major scale, and we can see that the root is the C, the third is the E, the fifth is the G, and the seventh would be the B, but it's all fine. But as you can see here, we have in the normal major scale, we have a major seventh. So what we need is the minor 7 or flat 7. That means we have to lower it by a half step. And then we have a B flat. So now we have the chord tones of the C7. As you can see here. And the same principle we use to construct the F7 chord and of course the G7 chord. So now that are the chords. So and if you want to play solo, it's easy, just use those tones and it will sound perfect. But improvisation will be the topic of another tutorial about in the blues. Chapter 2 would be the how to improvise. So if you have no idea about what chord tones are, you can check out this video. They will learn about chord tones. Of course, there are all kinds of variations of the blues. Going into all of these would be go on the scope, so we just have a look at the jazz blues. I want to show you the jazz blues, which is very common and the basis of all other kinds of blues as well. So let's have a look. The jazz blues is the same, it's 12 bars, and this is the basis of it. Now there are some changes, but these changes I'm doing now, they don't have to be there each one. So one maybe only this or that, they don't need to be there all. So the first thing is to put the fourth degree, the subdominant, in the second bar, and then, yeah, that's what I said before. The green chords are the extension variations of the jazz blues, and they do not always have to be there. You will see this E minor later. So going back to the root then, this is just an insertion of the fourth degree. The next thing is to put an F sharp diminished chord between the subdominant and the tonic, and another thing is to change the fourth degree to a second degree, and this way put in a minor chord in the blues, which is very new because we had only major chords and now we have a minor triad. But if we do this, we have to change the fifth degree here. So another thing is putting in A7 before the D minor 7, which is a fifth degree of D minor. So we have here a secondary dominant going to the D minor, and at least we could make a 2 minor 7 5 7 here, which means in the moment it's a 3 minor 7. I will show you this later. It's just to show you now in some of all the options we have, and we have a closer look at them very soon. So, and the last thing is to put a turnaround inside, and here it could be the D could be a minor 7, or it could be just a D7 chord, and this is called the turnaround. So, but we want to have a closer look what this means. The first thing is here we put in a subdominant of C, and so we get a new cadence here. Oh, this is German. Oh, never mind. Cadence means cadence. Subdominant of C, so we have a 1-4-1 cadence here. C7, F7, C7. The next thing is, and this is very, very common, is the F-sharp diminished chord here. That's something interesting because all that changes between the F7 and the F-sharp diminished is the root, as you can see here. They have the same tones, only the root changes. And what happens here is that you get a chromatic bass movement from the F-sharp to the G, and most bass player play on the one of the C7 after the F-sharp diminished here. They play a G, they play a C7 over G. So we have a wonderful chromatic movement here. Then the next thing is this D minor 7, and this is very, very common in jazz because what happens here is that the D minor 7 replaces the F, which is the subdominant. So we have the 2 minor 7 is nothing else than the subdominant parallel of the subdominant. So what means is the chords are almost similar. I will show you here. This is an F triad and a D minor 7, and as you can see, all that changes is the bass note. So we have now a D in bass. So you can also write a D minor 7 as F/D. That's absolutely the same, sounds the same, has the same tones. So, and that's all that happens here, and it's very often so in jazz we very seldom have the subdominant. This is almost replaced with the subdominant parallel, so that we have the 2 minor 7 K, 2 minor 7 5 7 1 cadence, and that's what happens here by putting in the D minor 7. We get a movement of descending fifths in the bass, and this is typical for jazz. That means that the bass notes move in the cycle of fifths. So we have here a 2 minor 7 5 7 1, which is the most common harmonic structure in jazz songs. As you can see here, the cycle of fifths, you can see that the way the chords come is always counterclockwise, the cycle of fifths. The fifth D is the fifth of 1, so the subdominant D is subdominant of G, and on the other hand G is subdominant of C, and that's why this sounds good and works fine. That the same thing happens here. We just put in another 2 minor 7 5 7. The E minor functions as a 2 to the D, and the A7 is the fifth of the D. So the only difference here is that the D minor is not an end point. It's an end point and starting point in one. So because E minor 7 A7 goes to D, and then the D is not a tonic, it changes to a minor chord, and this way it becomes a new 2 subdominant parallel and goes on with the movement. This is very, very common in jazz, rhythm change and stuff like this. You can see this everywhere. So as you can see here in the circle of fifths, you can see E goes to A goes to D, D goes to G, G goes to C. So we have a very long movement within the cycle of fifths. Very, very common. And the same happens here. So we have the A7, D minor 7, G7. It's the same principle. So the A7 is the fifth of the D minor 7 or the D7, and the D7 goes to the G, and then it goes back to the head of the tune to the C. This is called a turnaround. So you start with the C and then it goes to the A, D, G. This is very, very common. It's called the 1 6 2 5 1 turnaround, and this is very often in the end of songs when it goes back to the to the head, 4 solos or whatever. As you can see, I said before, the A7 is the dominant to the D. The D changes to the 2 and the 5, 1. I think it's pretty easy to understand. If you analyze tunes, you will see this is very common, and you can see it over in the cycle of fifths. This is the turnaround. So knowing the cycle of fifths is obviously a good thing in music theory. Well, of course, there are much more other variations, but I would like to explain one example of a so-called hidden blues. There's a very famous tune, I think you all know, by Herbie Hancock. This is called Watermelon Man, and this is nothing else than a blues, a so-called extended blues, because as you see, there is a blues hidden, even if it's 16 bars, but as you can see, I've just changed it to C, since the original key is F, but I changed it to C because so you can better understand what you learned before, and you can see it here though. So what we can see, that the blues is here. Yeah. If you don't look at the G flat 7, that's just a chord on the 4. It's not important for us now. But as you can see, we have a complex blues, and there's an insertion of 4 bars, and these 4 bars are nothing different than the 5/7 4/7 5/7 4/7 5/7 4/7. This is just a very easy way to change the tune, you know, and it shows the idea of how a composer works. He takes the blues and then just puts in 4 bars in a logical way, of course, so, and gets a new tune. Pretty easy, I think, pretty good to understand. Well, another thing, and we go there before, is the tritone. This is German again. This is tritone substitution. That means we take a look. So here we have a different kind of cadence, because if you really look at it really theoretical, you see that this is a 5 1 sub 6 1 cadence. So you can see this chord G flat 7 is a tritone substitution. We have a look at this in a moment. So we have a 5 1 sub 4 6 1 cadence, but the more easier way is just to look at it as a chromatic passing G flat F. So let's have a look at the tritone substitution, which is called the flat 5 substitution as well, as I think in German it is. I hope it's in the rest of the world as well. It's a very commonly used technique of reharmonization in jazz. What happens is a chord is replaced by the chord on its tritone, diminished fifth. So the special thing about this is that the important function tones, 2 times important, so just 1 time would be enough. Well, the important function tones 3 and 7, which make the function of a chord, are retained. They simply change their seats. You will see what this means. So here we have 2 5 in C, and we have a 2 sub 5 in C. And as you can see, if you look at the numbers, the D minor, the 7 goes to the 3 of the G7, and this goes to the B flat of the C7, which is a leading line there. The same happens with the 3 of the D minor 7. That goes to the, that is, change the seats from the 3 to the 7. So the F is in the D minor, it functions as the 3rd, and in the G7 it functions as the 7, and then it moves in a half step to the E of the C7. So the same thing happens if you change the G7 by a D flat 7. the C of the D minor 7 goes to the C flat, which is a B, of the D flat 7, which is the function 7, and the F of the D minor 7 stays and is still the 3 of the D flat 7, and then it moves in half step to the E of the C7. So what happens here is the leading lines of the 2, 5, 1 is the same as the leading lines of the 2, sub 5, 1. Maybe not too easy if you have no idea about jazz, harmonics, but people who have a bit of an idea, they should understand it. Well, here as again I show you, you see that the numbers just change. The B is in the G7, it's a 3, in the D flat 7, it's 7. The 7th of the G7 is the 3rd of the D flat 7. And you can do this, and you will see this in all kind of tunes, and often it's so that the piano player does it or the bass player does it, you know. Even if there's a G7, the piano player may play in D flat 7, or the bass player. Makes no real difference, just the color changes, just changing the color of the chord. And what it does is it creates again, and we had this before with the 4 and the flat, the sharp 4 and the 1, it creates a chromatic bass movement in the cadence, because most chords go in around the circle of fifths, and so it's good to change the movement of the bass notes, that it's not too mechanical. Well, that's what I said before here. So much for the theory. In upcoming chapter 2, I will tell you how to improvise over a blues. Thank you. If you like the video, share it with your friends and give a thumb up.